Hello, I'm Dilek Tunan. You're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Global protests erupted after Israel intercepted a Gaza-bound aid flotilla, sparking clashes and arrests. US President Donald Trump warns of possible federal job and project cuts if the shutdown continues. And Armenia says it has agreed with Azerbaijan to reopen transport links, allowing mutual access to infrastructure as part of ongoing peace efforts. Munich airport has reopened after a drone sighting near its airspace forced a temporary shutdown and grounded multiple flights on Thursday night. At least 17 flights were cancelled, affecting nearly 3,000 passengers, while another 15 were diverted to nearby cities, including Stuttgart, Vienna and Frankfurt. The airport closed 2 hours ahead of its usual overnight curfew as a safety precaution. Federal police said the drones were seen twice after dark, but due to poor visibility, details about their size or origin remain unknown. Several European airports have faced similar disruptions in recent weeks, with authorities still investigating the source of the drones. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has accused Europe of blocking peace in Ukraine, saying Western leaders are driving the continent toward militarization. Speaking at the Valdai Discussion Club in Sochi, he said Moscow had no plans to attack NATO, dismissing the idea as impossible to believe. Putin framed the conflict as driven by Europe's actions rather than Moscow's choices. He warned Russia would not tolerate further pressure and said any threat to its security would draw a rapid response. With that, he turned to Europe's military build-up, pointing directly to Germany.
We simply cannot ignore what's happening. We have no right to do so for reasons of our own security. I repeat, our defense and security. Therefore, we are closely monitoring the escalating militarization of Europe. Is this just talk, or is it time for us to take countermeasures? We hear, and you know this, in Germany, for example, they say that the German army should once again be the most powerful in Europe. Well, fine. We're listening carefully, watching. What exactly is meant by that? I think no one doubts that Russia's response will not be long in coming. The response to these threats will be, to put it mildly, very convincing. It's precisely a response. We ourselves have never initiated a military confrontation.
A Finnish court ruled it doesn't have jurisdiction to prosecute the captain and 2 senior officers of the Eagle S oil tanker. They're accused of breaking 5 undersea power and internet cables in the Baltic Sea last year. The suspects were charged with dragging the anchor for about 90 kilometres along the seabed on the 25th of December. The 3 crew members denied the charges. Finland says the ship is believed to be part of Russia's shadow fleet of tankers. Helsinki District Court said it wasn't possible to apply Finnish criminal law to the case. A tanker from Russia's so-called shadow fleet detained by the French Navy has resumed its journey. That's according to data from maritime websites Marine Traffic and Vessel Finder on Friday. It's after French Navy commandos had intercepted the Boracay oil tanker on Saturday off the coast of western France. Authorities said an investigation was underway after the crew allegedly failed to provide proof of the vessel's nationality. French President Emmanuel Macron said the move was to block revenue funding Moscow's war effort in Ukraine. Russian President Vladimir Putin called France's actions an act of piracy. Over in Germany, it's 35 years ago that the country officially reunified after the world watched the Berlin Wall coming down, marking the end of a division and the beginning of unity. The day is a reminder that a huge barricade once split the nation, dividing families and friends.
Every year on the 3rd of October, Germany marks Unity Day, the day when a divided nation officially became one. It is a moment to reflect on the country's history, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the reunification that reshaped Germany.
To understand why this day is so important, we need to go back to the years after the Second World War. Imagine a city where neighbours, friends, even families woke up to find themselves cut in two by concrete and barbed wire. That was Berlin in 1961, and it is the story that makes German Unity Day. After the Second World War, Germany was divided into 4 zones, each controlled by one of the Allied powers: the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. Berlin, though deep inside the Soviet zone, was also split into 4 sectors. By 1949, 2 new states had been created. In the west, the Federal Republic of Germany, democratic and market-driven. In the east, the German Democratic Republic, a socialist state under Soviet influence. But the GDR had a problem. Its own people were leaving. Between 1949 and 1961, more than 2.5 million East Germans fled, many of them doctors, engineers, teachers, and students. By the summer of 1961, thousands were crossing into West Berlin every single day. The brain drain threatened to collapse the East German economy. So, the authorities acted. On the night of 12th to 13th August 1961, East German forces rolled out barbed wire and blockades around West Berlin. Streets, rail lines, even family gardens were cut in two. In the weeks and months that followed, the makeshift barrier became a permanent one. A wall of concrete, reinforced by electrified fences, watchtowers, guard dogs, and landmines. By the 1980s, the Berlin Wall stretched 155 kilometers in total, 43 kilometers slicing through Berlin itself, and the rest circling the western half of the city. It was actually a system of fortifications, parallel walls, floodlights, the so-called death strip in between, and armed patrols under orders to shoot anyone who tried to escape. And yet, thousands still risked it. Around 5,000 people made it across, through tunnels, in homemade balloons, even smuggled in cars. At least 140 lost their lives in the attempt, though some counts put the number closer to 190. Each escape and each death was a reminder of how far people would go for freedom. For 28 years, the wall stood as the concrete face of the Cold War. But by 1989, change was sweeping Eastern Europe. In East Germany, mass demonstrations demanded democracy. The Soviet leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, refused to send in tanks, unlike his predecessors. Then came 9th November 1989. At a press conference, an East German official, Günther Schabowski, stumbled over new travel rules, making it sound as though the borders were open immediately. That evening, thousands of East Berliners surged toward the checkpoints. Overwhelmed, confused guards stepped aside. The wall, the barrier that had defined a generation, was suddenly open. Crowds from both sides climbed the concrete, embraced, and began chipping away at it with hammers and chisels. Within days, pieces of the wall were being passed from hand to hand as souvenirs. Less than a year later, on the 3rd of October 1990, East and West Germany formally reunified. Since then, German Unity Day has been a national holiday. Each year, a different federal state hosts the official program of exhibitions, concerts, and debates. The date chosen is important too. While the wall itself fell on the 9th of November 1989, that day also carries a darker memory. The Nazi pogrom against Jews in 1938, known as Kristallnacht. To avoid overshadowing that history, Germany instead marks reunification on the 3rd of October, the day the legal and political merger was complete. As Germany marks the 35th anniversary of its historic reunification, debates over lingering political and social divides continue. Yet the Berlin Wall remains a powerful symbol of the nation's journey toward unity and the challenges it has overcome.
Now Europe turns its eyes to Prague. The Czech Republic votes in a general election that could bring former Prime Minister Andrej Babiš back to power. The outcome will signal whether Czechia stays firmly aligned with the European Union and NATO, or whether it will increase Moscow's influence in Central Europe.
In Prague and across the country, polling stations are open as Czechs choose all 200 members of the lower house of parliament. Voting runs through Saturday, with parties needing at least 5% of the vote to enter parliament under the proportional system. The front-runner is 71-year-old billionaire and former Prime Minister Andrej Babiš. His populist ANO party is campaigning on tax cuts, higher wages and calls to halt support for Ukraine. But despite leading the polls, ANO is unlikely to secure a majority, making coalition negotiations crucial. Prime Minister Peter Fiala's pro-Western Spolu coalition is calling for continued alignment with the European Union and NATO. The far-right SPD is pushing for a referendum on leaving the EU, while the far-left Stachilo movement opposes NATO and rejects military aid to Kiev. Opinion surveys put ANO at around 30 to 32%, Spolu at about 20%, with several smaller parties such as the Pirates, Stan and Motorists for themselves expected to play a decisive role in shaping the next government. Polling stations close on Saturday afternoon. Preliminary results are expected the same day, with near-complete figures later in the evening of October 4th. The outcome will decide whether Czechia remains firmly anchored in Brussels and NATO or takes a turn toward a more Moscow-friendly course.
Global condemnation is mounting after Thursday's Manchester synagogue attack that left 2 people dead and 3 others injured. Political leaders and community groups have voiced outrage and called for unity.
The attack on a synagogue in Manchester has sparked shock and anger at home and abroad on Thursday. Leaders are speaking out, denouncing the violence and expressing solidarity with the Jewish community. Prime Minister of the UK, Keir Starmer, emphasised that it is not a new hate.
We must be clear. It is a hatred that is rising once again, and Britain must defeat it once again. But to every Jewish person in this country, I also want to say this. I know how much fear you will be holding inside of you. I really do. And so, on behalf of our country, I express my solidarity, but also my sadness that you still have to live with these fears. Nobody should have to do that. Nobody.
The reaction was echoed in Copenhagen, Denmark, where the European Political Community Summit was taking place. French President Emmanuel Macron impressed support to both Britain and Jewish communities across Europe.
The terrorist attack in Manchester is once again proof that our Europe is a victim of this terrorist madness and of anti-Semitism. And I truly want to reiterate to Prime Minister Starmer and to the British people all our support also to the Jewish community in Britain and across Europe.
Along with France, United Nations officials called the attack particularly heinous. Deputy UN spokesperson Farhan Haq delivered the Secretary-General's message.
The Secretary-General strongly condemns today's deadly terrorist attack on a synagogue in Manchester in the United Kingdom. Houses of worship are sacred places where people can go to find peace. Targeting a synagogue on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, is particularly heinous. The Secretary-General extends his deepest condolences to the victims and their families and wishes a swift recovery to the injured.
As tributes continue to pour in, authorities are urging calm while investigations into the Manchester attack remain underway.
Israel is facing more international condemnation and global protests after its military intercepted almost all of about 40 boats in a flotilla carrying aid to Gaza. Officials say it's detained more than 450 activists.
There were clashes in Sweden between pro-Palestinian demonstrators and police as hundreds protested on Thursday against Israel's decision to intercept and detain activists on a Gaza-bound flotilla carrying aid and medicine. The tensions led to numerous arrests. Demonstrations have erupted worldwide as thousands took their anger to the streets. It turned violent in Spain, where supporters of Palestinians and police came face to face in the capital, Madrid, when officers tried to disperse the crowds. Tensions also escalated in Barcelona, where international food chains were vandalized.
I'm hurt. I feel incredibly helpless. I feel anger and sick when I listen to people speaking on the TV or see Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at a summit saying that children in Palestine eat over 2,000 calories per day. How can they allow that man inside to say those things? The anger in our society has accumulated is here today.
In Italy, emotions also ran high as police used tear gas. Protesters in Brasilia demanded the release of detained Brazilian activists who were on board one of the boats in the flotilla.
Regarding the detained Brazilians, the Foreign Ministry has taken a firm stance. But this is more than diplomacy. It's about genocide. I don't think diplomacy is enough anymore. We need a firmer measure, like breaking off relations. That's what we're asking for.
In Paris, demonstrators gathered in front of the Israeli embassy to show support for Gaza.
I came to demonstrate in front of the Israeli embassy to show our support for the people of Gaza and to demonstrate that the French people denounce the genocide currently being committed in Gaza by the Israeli army.
Governments also responded to Israel's actions. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has urged Israel to immediately repatriate the detained Mexican nationals. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa urged Israel to immediately release South Africans who were also on the flotilla, including former President Nelson Mandela's grandson, Nkosi Zwelivelile Mandela. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan criticized Israeli aggression, saying it showed Israel's government has no intention of letting hopes for peace grow. Israeli officials have repeatedly denounced the flotilla mission as a stunt. Israel says it's defending itself against charges of genocide in the International Court of Justice.
A Hamas official says the group will soon respond to President Donald Trump's peace proposal on Gaza. Trump presented a 20-point document calling for an immediate ceasefire and an exchange of captives held by Hamas with Palestinian political prisoners held by Israel. Hamas says discussions on the proposal are ongoing and that it will respond in a way that serves the interests of the Palestinian people. President Donald Trump says federal workers may face being fired and some government projects could be cut if the shutdown continues. In an interview with One America News, Trump pointed to a memo from the Office of Management and Budget suggesting cost-saving measures are being reviewed. He also said tariff revenues projected to reach $1 trillion a year could be used to help reduce the national debt and potentially fund rebate checks for Americans. The US federal debt now stands at $37.64 trillion, according to Treasury data.
Well, there could be firings, and that's their fault, and it could also be other things. I mean, we could cut projects that they wanted, favorite projects, and they'd be permanently cut. So you could say, a lot of people are saying, Trump wanted this, that I wanted this closing, and I didn't want it. But a lot of people are saying it because I'm allowed to cut things that should have never been approved in the first place, and I will probably.
As Europe grapples with the continuing war in Ukraine, from debates on a drone wall to a proposed $140 billion loan for Kyiv, Germany today marks its National Unity Day. On this day in 1990, reunification became a reality. East and West became one. The Berlin Wall was gone. The Cold War was ending, and now 35 years later, there's again war on the European continent with Russian troops occupying part of Ukraine. German reunification was never merely a German matter, it was a continental moment sealed by the so-called 2+4 agreement. the two Germanys and the four formerly occupying powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, France and the Soviet Union. The deal embedded a unified Germany within NATO and the European community, later the EU. Moscow under President Mikhail Gorbachev accepted this, although he later argued that the compromise carried an understanding that NATO would not expand 1 inch eastward. Washington and London denied any such promise was made, yet this disputed claim of a broken assurance remains central to Russia's worldview of NATO and is now cited as part of Moscow's justification for the war in Ukraine. Joining us now live to discuss the connection between the events of 1990 and today's conflict in Ukraine is Klaus Jürgens, a political analyst at Economy First Limited in London, UK. Klaus, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, Julie. Pleasure.
Now, German unification was not simply a national event, but a continental one, requiring US involvement too. What was its impact on the global order?
Yes, it is. If I may start with a flashback to Germany, of course, I was there on that fateful day when the Berlin Wall came down. Now, it did not happen overnight, although it did happen at night, but people could read the signs, and then the courageous people took the streets in an unexpected manner and fashion. Now, let me start by saying, post-World War II, Germany, and please interrupt me, Germans are known to go into historical details for 2 hours and then forget the plot. So, no, but I'll be brief. Go back, Second World War, and we have to say that a new Germany emerged over time. It took a lot of time. Mm-hmm. Think about the European Community for Coal and Steel. Think about Germany, West Germany at the time, joining NATO. In 1973, both Germanys, there were two at the time, of course, were allowed to join the United Nations. And then things happened step, and on the 3rd of October 1990, exactly as you said, 35 years ago, the two Germanys were united and became a sovereign state. Now, you mentioned changing of the global world order after 1990. Yes, of course. A former semi-sovereign state, that's what I once said at London School of Economics, it's all on the record, mm-hmm. Semi-sovereign in a sense of being still divided. There are two Germanys and no one really knows what is going to happen. Mm-hmm. And eventually the two Germanys did unite. Of course, the global world order changed, first of all by setting an example. Perhaps there are other two nations in other parts of the world trying to attempt the same. And at the same moment, it underlined that Germany has and had come of age. The biggest problems you mentioned, without Washington, it would not have happened. I was around at the time and family in Paris. And the biggest obstacle, according to me, was always the French objection, the Paris objection. Shall we really allow reunification? And what made matters even more worse, at the time it was still in Bonn, of course. Some, I can't quote names, but believe me, it's a bit of fact-finding going back all these years. There was no plan B in the drawer in the West German government. Can this ever happen? Will it happen? And when will it happen? So, and then eventually it did happen. And this created huge problems for the former eastern part, economically, social, and what have you. But yes, France played a key role, and eventually Paris then said, yes, let's go ahead. And yes, it changed the geopolitical world order. Germany became one again, one nation. And you see the Brandenburg Gate behind here in your clip. Yes, mm-hmm. I walk past it regularly. To me, it is no longer a sign of trying to be telling the world what to do. No, it's a democracy, and all democracies have some flaws. But it is a sign of that when the people speak, actually that democracy sometimes happens faster. Yes, but the geopolitical world order has changed and Germany became a key player. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and Klaus, there's one phrase that has never faded. There would be no extension of NATO's jurisdiction 1 inch to the east. This is attributed to US Secretary of State James Baker. Did such a promise exist, and what weight does it carry today?
Well, of course, in the past, promises existed. And what we just discussed, a changing geopolitical world order, of course, Washington might say, hey, guys, the geopolitical world order has changed. So we have to expand eastwards. And everyone in politics and international relations would probably say 5, 10, 15 years on from what a politician says on day 1. Perhaps day 2, he might change his mind because surroundings and the environment has changed. Now, we have to go back one more time. It's German. We don't call it Republic Day in Germany. We call it Day of National Unity. It's a very interesting point, often overlooked. It is the Day of National Unity because officially on the 3rd of October, the reunification was accepted and granted and done, and not before in 1989, as even some German commentators sometimes get wrong. We united in 1989. No, you didn't, perhaps on paper, but in reality, de jure, as we call it, no, it was literally on the 3rd of October 1990, 35 years ago. Expansion eastward, yes. There's this another famous saying in Germany that there will never be a world without Russia. And post-World War, Western Germany tried to build bridges, and in particular Chancellor Willy Brandt, by saying, yes, we acknowledge the horrors of the Nazi regime. At the same time, we want to, famously, he said, we want to dare more democracy at home. Now look, and this worked. Forget about today's troubles and the far right, and you mentioned, of course, we saw Palestine and Israel and the Staatsräson. If we only look at the past and how Germany managed to actually come out on top again as a democracy, it was definitely Willy Brandt who helped it a lot. He went to the ghetto and he fell down on his knees, a photo I will never forget. My generation was inspired by this. And then later on he said, we have to dare more democracy. And that's what the Germans did, regardless of left, right, or in the center. They did. And but NATO expansion eastwards, I think most Germans back then and now, I haven't made a poll, but looking into my little crystal ball now, with all hesitation, I think most people would say it's a dangerous move.
Okay.
Because look, sorry, I'm too long.
No, that's all right, Klaus. We're just running out of time. We're running a little bit short of time, so I'm going to have to finish it there. But hopefully we will continue in another conversation some other time. Thank you so much for joining. Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Turkey says it has no intention of giving up Russian gas against the backdrop of growing resistance to Russian energy. Turkish Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar said the country plans to increase gas imports from Russia, Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. The minister pointed to existing gas supply agreements with Russia ahead of the winter season. He said access to these resources must be ensured without compromising energy security.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov denied all claims.
Armenia and Azerbaijan have agreed to mutually unblock transport links. Armenian Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan says both countries will gain access to each other's transport systems, including railways, roads and other infrastructure. He noted that the shortest link between mainland Azerbaijan and Nakhchivan will serve as a transit route, while Armenia could use Nakhchivan's territory to connect its north and south by a railway that does not currently exist.
My Prime Minister and President.
Now, on the same topic, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan says he believes the opening of transport links in the region is inevitable in the near future. Pashinyan, who also expressed confidence that a peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan will be formally established soon, said the Armenian government places particular importance on creating conditions for the sustainable development of the mining industry, one of the country's strategic sectors. A sharp increase in Armenia's foreign trade turnover is directly connected to sanctions imposed on Russia. Recent data from Armenia's State Statistics Committee and international organizations has shown. At a press conference held today in Baku, Fikret Yusufov, head of the International Economic Research Public Union, told attendees that the value of Armenia's foreign trade turnover has grown just over 4 times in the past 5 years. It found Armenia imports sanctioned goods from Russia and re-exports them as its own products, concealing their origin to help fund its war against Ukraine.
First of all, of course, by taking these steps, namely selling Russian products through its territory, Armenia is financing Russia's war in Ukraine. In this war, in this unjust war, naturally, as a state that supports Ukraine, we are against it. On the other hand, Armenia's trade relations undermine transparency in the region's trade, distort international trade, and lead to manipulations. Therefore, of course, we are against this. Because in this region we want to create stability in every sense.
Iran and Pakistan have agreed to exchange intelligence to combat drug trafficking networks, particularly across their shared border. The head of Iran's anti-narcotics police and his counterpart met in Islamabad to discuss bilateral cooperation.
Combating drug trafficking networks at the border between Iran and Pakistan has always been challenging, particularly because of the geographical location, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Iran also borders Afghanistan, the world's largest illicit opium producer. So Iran's eastern frontier has become a major transit path for illegal substances. Because of this challenge, Iran says it has built one of the strongest counter-narcotics enforcement capabilities in the region. Tehran says it has seized 74% of the world's opium and 25% of the world's heroin and morphine in 2012, according to the UN World Drug Report of 2014. And now, the Iranian and Pakistani anti-narcotics chiefs have agreed to enhance intelligence sharing to identify and fight drug trafficking networks and to boost border coordination. According to the IRNA news agency, Brigadier General Iraj Kakavand, head of Iran's anti-narcotics police, met the Major General Abdul Mueid, the ANF commander, during a visit to the force's headquarters in Islamabad on Tuesday. They both agreed to further information exchange to neutralize drug trafficking networks, take joint operational measures to combat cross-border drug trafficking, and overcome challenges to prevent drug smuggling. The meeting comes as Iran says it spends millions of dollars annually on border control, including for construction of expensive barriers along its border with Afghanistan and Pakistan. More than 3,700 Iranian law enforcement officials have been killed, and more than 12,000 have been maimed in counter-narcotics operations over the last 3 decades, according to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, A-News TV.
In Tbilisi and across Georgia, voters head to the polls this Saturday to elect mayors and municipal councils. But the stakes are much higher than local governance. The public mood is deeply polarised, and the ruling Georgian Dream Party has framed the vote as a choice between independence and what it calls foreign interference. Our correspondent Nini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
In Tbilisi and across Georgia, voters will be choosing mayors and municipal councils this Saturday, but the stakes are much larger than City Hall, and the public mood is polarized. The ruling Georgian Dream Party has framed the election as a choice between independence and what it calls foreign interference. However, opposition parties and civic groups argue that Georgian Dream has hollowed out democracy, tightened control over the courts, the media and civil society, and is steering the country away from Europe and close to Moscow. Supporters of the government highlight stability and sovereignty, insisting that Georgian Dream has protected Georgia from from outside meddling. Critics warned that the very essence of democracy is on the line, pointing to the shrinking space for dissent and the refusal to create conditions for fair competition. Meanwhile, abroad, the European Union and the United States have voiced concern over Georgia's democratic backsliding, and the Council of Europe is preparing a debate on the country's political crisis. And although the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe was formally invited, the invitation came only a month before the vote, too late to mount a meaningful observation mission. The results matter not only for Georgia, but also for the whole South Caucasus, a region where fragile security and shifting alliances make every political turn significant. The results will decide on whether Georgia remains on a European path or risks drifting into deeper isolation at a time when democracy, sovereignty and regional balance are all in play. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Welcome back. You're watching A News. The question of mounting US pressure on the Kremlin's energy partners to reduce or halt their purchases of Russian oil and gas was amongst the central themes raised at the Valdai Discussion Club, a platform traditionally used by President Vladimir Putin to convey his key messages. Earlier, during his press conference with President Erdogan, President Trump suggested that Ankara should ideally refrain from buying Russian gas, although he stopped short of pressing the matter further in public. On the 2nd of October, Turkish Minister of Energy and Natural Resources Alparslan Bayraktar stated in an interview with local media that Turkey would continue to purchase gas from all available suppliers, including Russia. Joining us to discuss is Orkan Nabiev, political analyst from Baku, Azerbaijan, and Bekir İlhan from the Turkey Research Foundation, Ankara, Turkey. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to you both.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for hosting me.
Now I'll start with Orkan. Orkan, how likely is it that Turkish purchases of Russian gas have become a key contentious issue between Presidents Trump and Erdogan?
If we will consider the rhetorics of the Trump about assistance of the to Ukraine, and he said that before to put the sanctions against Russia, first of all the European countries should stop buying the fuel and the gas from Russia. And one of the main markets of Russian gas is Turkey. Turkey buys approximately 40-45% of the Turkish gas comes from the Russia, and it's the second largest market for Russia. And annually, it can be $8 billion from the Turkish demand, $billion from the Turkish demand. This revenue makes Ankara one of the Gazprom's top customers.
Okay. Now, Bekir, what are the limits of Turkey's geopolitical balancing act between the US and Russia, and what opportunities and challenges does its NATO membership present?
Yeah, first of all, we need to clarify that no decision has been made regarding the issue, and Turkish Energy Minister said that Turkey intends to keep buying the Russian oil. So, this is the case right now, but it does not mean that the Turkish position, is not changed. But regarding the issue, I would say the United States demands Turkey to stop buying the Russian gas. Instead, the United States wants Turkey to, buy LNG from the United States. But even if Turkey decided to buy or decided to stop buying Russian gas, I don't think that it's going to be a huge issue between Russia and Turkey. And Russia has already announced that they're gonna, respect the Turkish decision, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, I don't think that it's going to be a huge issue because, just look at the past. Turkey and Russia had many important and serious challenges in the past. And right now, this energy issue is not going to be a huge issue. And just remember that Turkey, did not participate the Western sanctions on Russia, and also Turkey, has a very balanced position regarding the Ukraine war, and so the Russians, I think that will respect the Turkish decision regarding the issue. But on the long run, I would say Turkey is trying to diversify its, energy supply. Turkey is also, buying gas from Azerbaijan and for buying oil from the Middle Eastern countries. And in the long run, I would say, even if Turkey stopped buying the Russian gas, I think it's not going to be a huge geopolitical challenge for Turkey, but for sure there will be some economic and energy security aspects regarding it.
Okay, all right. And Orkan, the Turkish Stream and Blue Stream pipelines are both said to be operating at full capacity, while Ankara is working to expand imports from Azerbaijan and potentially Turkmenistan. Within this context, is it in Turkey's interests to limit Russian gas purchases?
I don't think so that it is Turkish interest to limit its purchases. Diversification is already under the way. 15-20% comes from Azerbaijan. 20-25% is LNG supplier like United States, Qatar, and Algeria. Turkmenistan is possibly a new source. It's right now it's under 1 billion cubic meters, but it can be developed. But it needs the Trans-Caspian pipeline or through the Iran and Azerbaijan. If Turkey suddenly stops importing Russian gas, economic and political fallout will be served. So Turkey will not stop it immediately. Yes, Turkey is looking for new sources, but stopping the purchasing the Russian gas, and it will be very difficult for Turkey, because if they have the contracts, they have the new markets. Turkey also sell works as a gas hub, the potential energy hub for Europe. So they sell the not Russian gas, they sell the Turkish gas under the Turkish brand to the Europe. So it will be very hard to Turkey just to cut off the Russian gas. But Turkey always looking for the new sources, and Turkmenistan will be a great source. But now the infrastructure is not ready. Through Iran and Azerbaijan, now it's very hard to get gas. The new pipeline, Trans-Caspian, would be efficient, but now it's not ready yet.
Okay. And Bekir, if Russia faces... Okay. If Russia faces constraints in its oil and gas markets, might it lean more heavily into influence in the South Caucasus using pipelines or transit dependencies as leverage against Azerbaijan, Georgia or Armenia?
Yeah, for sure. Russia is also trying to diversify its market. Just remember that European Union was one of the largest Russian oil markets, and then they are planning to, completely exit from the Russian markets by 2028. And at this point, as you indicated, that Russia will try to focus on South Caucasia, and like you said, South Caucasia is an important energy hub, energy transit corridor, and also an energy source right now. And also we know that Russia has many interests there in the Caucasus as well, and also we are also witnessing some cooperation possibility between Turkey, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and also Armenia in the Caucasus. And also if Russia cut its market from the European Union, I think it's going to focus on South Caucasia to diversify its energy markets, I would say.
Okay. And Orkan, how might Central Asian producers respond or realign if Russia's energy access is constrained? Could we see accelerated diversification away from Russian pipelines?
Of course we can see it, but most of the Central Asian gas suppliers, they're oriented to China and India. Most of the China is the biggest importer of Central Asian gas. It's Kazakhstan gas, Turkmenistan gas, and there is no new, infrastructure pipelines that can bring Central Asian gas towards Azerbaijan, towards the Caucasus, and from the Azerbaijan, from the different ways, from Armenia, from Georgia to Turkey. But if it will be planned, now we know that it's only from the Turkmenistan, small amount. Iran buys it from the Turkmenistan and they sells us their own gas directly from the border, because there is no direct pipeline. And construction of such kind of pipelines, it needs big investments. So there should be big investors, there should be big interest, and we know that if Europe wants Europe can be biggest investor for such kind of pipelines to get the Central Asian gas through Azerbaijan, through Armenia, through Georgia, through Turkey, directly to Europe. They will have to invest on it, but they will not invest in it. As said the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, their agenda is more concentrated on green energy, and they have the bureaucratic bans, in the legislative bans on how to say, like on the fuels, on the carbohydrates. So they're more concentrated on the green kind of energies. That's why we don't have such kind of the big investments to have the pipelines through Caspian Sea or through Iran to bring Central Asian gas to Azerbaijan, and from Azerbaijan export it to Turkey and Europe.
Okay, and Bekir, in the context of the Valdai framework, is there risk that Russia pushes back more aggressively, militarily or diplomatically, in the Caucasus to counterbalance Western pressure on energy?
Yeah, for sure, there is such a possibility, but I don't think that in the long run Russia will be able to sustain such a policy. Right now, Russia has all its stakes on Ukrainian war, and for sure, the South Caucasus is an important geopolitical region for Russia. But right now, I think the Ukrainian case challenges Russia too much. I think Russia will focus all of its economic and political, weights on the Ukrainian war, and they are going to try to balance the European power on the Ukrainian case also. And I don't think that right now or in the short run Russia will try to disrupt the South Caucasus, but having after solve the Ukrainian case, maybe Russia will divert its interest in the region right now. But at this point, I don't think that Russia, especially in terms of military, will try to push the Western powers and American power from the South Caucasus right now. But for sure, on the other hand, Russia will try to use another means, but soft means like economy, like other kind of political means, but not military means. But but it does not mean that the South Caucasus is not important for Russia. For sure, right? Like I said, it's a very important region for Russia. Historically, Russia see the region as its backyard. But at the moment, I would say, given the fact that the Ukrainian war is continuing and Russia is invested too much in the Ukrainian war, they will not prefer challenge the American power or the European, the Western power in the South Caucasus right now. They will just focus on the Ukrainian war right now.
Okay. And Orkan, how can Azerbaijan or other regional actors navigate this pressure to preserve autonomy while engaging with both Western and Russian spheres?
I think that it becomes hard and hard, but Azerbaijan has a good experience in the past 30 years, since 35 years since its independence. However, year by year, considering that this kind of tensions between West and Russia, it will be hard. I think that later or sooner, Azerbaijan will have to decide which side they will stand. And considering that the Russian aggression against its neighbors, and considering that in the Ukrainian front, Russia being not getting the success, and there's a big probability that they will not get any success in the upcoming year, they will become more aggressive against its neighbors. So in this case, Azerbaijan will need to choose a side. And yes, Azerbaijan never wanted and now never don't want to have any kind of problems with its neighbors. But we saw that in the last 1 year, the tensions between Azerbaijan and Russia since the airplane crash issue and the Yekaterinburg issue, and Azerbaijan answered to the Russian Federation very tough. And this kind of the answers never liked by the neither Russian authorities nor the Russian society. And this kind of negativity will increase the tensions between two countries. And I think that Azerbaijan will choose a side in 1 or 2 years.
Okay. And Bekir, how is Azerbaijan positioned in this broader narrative? Does it appear more as a connector or a balancer?
Yeah, I would say Azerbaijan, we could define Azerbaijan both as a connector, as a balancer as well. In terms of geopolitical aspect, I would say Azerbaijan looks like a balancer, but in terms of, energy or economic aspect, I would say it seems like a, connector between East and the West right now. And I think also a good thing, you don't have to position or you don't have to define yourself in just for a single angle. And geopolitically, even in such a world where the uncertainties are increasing and the instability is coming in such a world, I would say you don't have to put all eggs on the same basket. You need to diversify your relations. You need to diversify your relations with the great powers, with the other countries. You need to build some regional cooperation, and also this is also very important in a world of instability. And I think Azerbaijan right now and its current foreign policy trajectory, I would say, it's increasing its autonomy, it's increasing its strategic autonomy, and it means that in the long run, Azerbaijan will emerge as a regional power as well. And right now, it's also investing in energy supply issues. It's investing in different security settings right now, and it tries to enhance its relations with the West and with the East as well. And for sure, it does not directly challenge Russia. Also, it does not exclude Russia. In these terms, I would say Azerbaijan has a very balanced approach in its foreign policy, and like I said, it's a very important issue, and it's a very useful strategy in a world of uncertainty, because you wouldn't know where the next risk comes from. And I think at this point, Azerbaijan could be defined both as a connector and a balancer country right now. But in the long run, I would say the future of Azerbaijan looks good.
Okay. Mr. Bekir İlhan and Mr. Orkan Nabiev, that brings us to the end there. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time and your contribution to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting us.
And that brings us to the end of the bulletin. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned to A News for more updates.